Okay, everyone. So just one last piece that I want to touch on here before putting down the programming for this week. It has to do with SQL, or so-called simple query language. As I mentioned in the last video, SQL, or SQL as it's often referred to, is a really powerful language that lets us quickly find selections and subselections of data. Not dissimilar to the way we see it done in a graphical way with Google Refine. This lets us do it even more directly. This is a common language for all kinds of databases. So MySQL databases are very common. It's an open source platform. Variations of SQL are used by big SQL Server Microsoft products. Although they're not the only kind, SQL databases are not the only kind of databases. For example, there are so-called non-relational databases. SQL is a so-called relational database. And basically, the thing to know about it is that this is a powerful way for us to do both data analysis and presentation, or generate multiple views of the same data set. So, for example, if you've taken the trouble to go ahead and get a lot of back data about CPI through your research or any other sort of numerical tabular data set, right? There's a lot of value in having a large data set, but you don't always want to present all of it. At the same time, it's really fracturing that data set out into multiple copies is problematic as well, right? Because you want everything to be up to date, but you don't want to have to go update it in multiple places, right? So obviously, if I saved a copy of this, if I said, look, I have this chart, but I really only want to show the data from starting in 2010. I could make a copy of my existing Fusion table here, and I could, create a separate, I could make a copy of it, I could make a separate version of it. I could only have the 2010 data in there, or from 2010. And use that to power a different chart from the one that I've already generated. But again, that's problematic because then every time I go to update one, I want to also update the other, and I painted myself back into that corner of having to update a lot of different files in multiple places in order to stay up to date. So this is another reason why working with this dynamic data and the Fusion Table SQL API is so powerful for us, because what it does is apply simple sort of logical mathematical restrictions to the data that is returned from this table. So in our first example, we used a very simple select star from. Select is a common is the sort of most basic statement. It basically says these are the things that I want. Asterisk or star is a way of saying everything. Give me all columns, all rows. Give me everything. From, right? From where? From what table do you want to do this? Well, I want to do it from the table with this big, long, ugly looking ID, right? And then we mentioned how we have this query string parameter, which is separated by an an ampersand, and it says key, which in this case refers to our API key, equals, and then we put in that big long ugly string. Well, here's the thing. If I want to select a subset of this data, what I can do is I can say, all right, I still want all the columns from this table, so I want date and value, but I only want it where certain conditions are met. And in that case, what I can do is I can say where, so literally where certain conditions are met. And in this case, I only want to see the data since 2010. So I need to provide it with the column name, right? And you can see right here in my response, it says this is the name of the column. So I'm going to say where date equals, or sorry, actually I'm going to say greater than. Okay, so this is an interesting thing. Even though you can see that this is set up as a string here, in that data table, in our Fusion table, date is a legitimate data type. It's its own data type. And in this case, it's actually being stored by this Fusion table as a so-called date type. This is the format that SQL understands dates to be written in. And so it can perform basic comparator functions on this. So it can say, I know that 2011 is after 2010 and 2009 is before 2010. And I know that, February comes after, is quote unquote greater than January, right? In sort of time terms. So I can actually use this, this greater than sign and say, I want to do it where the date is greater than. And in this case, and actually I probably want to say is greater than or equal to, right? And I can just combine those two things because I want to include January. And so I can say 2010 0101. Okay, you notice that I have wrapped this, this parameter in single quotation marks. That's a syntax that our API, that the Fusion Tables API likes. And I stick this ampersand right up against it because that ampersand is actually a delimiter, right? We talked about all kinds of delimiters, commas, semicolons, pipes, tabs. In a URL, an ampersand is a delimiter, and as is a question mark, but you only use the question mark at the beginning and then you use the ampersand every time thereafter. So if I did this correctly, there we go. I can see that I have gotten back now only the rows that are from January 2010 or later. So what this means is that if I wanted to change my chart or have an additional chart, I can just go back into my code and say, hey, you know what? Just go ahead and give this to me, right? I'm going to put my new big old funky looking URL in there. If I wanted to, I could actually create a separate variable that has this in it if I was worried about kind of messing up my GET request. But if I go ahead and upload this, I can say OK, right? Come back to my example. Oops, got into a tricky thing there. What happened? Ah. Interesting. Well, it looks like we generated an error, so I'm going to go check that out. But I want to impress upon you guys the value of this. So let me come back to you in just a second. We'll see what the problem was, and I will let you know when it's sorted. So just to demonstrate how finicky these things can be, I tried it again here, and I went back to my original data source. I looked at my select statement, right? Made sure that everything was working okay, reloaded this, looks fine, pasted it back into my JavaScript file here, and re-uploaded it, and now it seems that everything's working perfectly. So it's possible that there was just a temporary glitch in there or perhaps an error in what I copied and pasted. But again, as you see, I have this great thing now where basically I have a single data source. I'm able to update it remotely from anywhere that I am. I can share that opportunity to edit with reporters and editors and other folks at my organization. Likewise, I can choose to select only a subset of it if I want to have, you know, different views and different visualizations that are published live on the web and always stay up to date. SQL is a really powerful language, and we're really just not even scratching the surface with this. If you guys have specific questions, we can certainly talk about it in class, and we'll look for some resources that will be helpful for doing it, you know, for manipulating in a more robust way. But you can see there are all kinds of things. I mean, what if I just wanted to show, I probably wouldn't chart this, but you know, what if I just wanted to show I wanted to see all of the cases where, you know, in my data set where the value has been, you know, less than 2. There we go. I can see these are the only instances since the year 2000 that CPI has been less than 2. Again, we see how this is sort of the scripting way to do a very quick overview of our data set and understand kind of the shape of it, but also to let us drive multiple visualizations from essentially the same data set and the same code, which is something we're always, always happy to do. So that's all for this week. We'll take a look at this in class and answer any questions you guys have then.